Hi, so my name's Swen. I run the creative and strategy team at Foursquare. I want to talk to you guys about how we're combining foot traffic with data science in order to create location intelligence. So, some of you guys may have heard of Foursquare. If you have, it's probably for our two consumer-facing apps, Foursquare City Guide and Swarm. But what you probably don't know is that the data that we're generating from those apps and the technology we've built on top of them is actually powering 100,000 companies around the world. And I'm sure you guys recognize some of these brands that we're powering up here. They represent some of the biggest technology companies on the planet. And a lot of times when I'm out at events like this, people say, you know, I used to use Foursquare, or it wasn't really for me. And I say, you're probably using Foursquare, you just don't know it. So this is a data conference. Let's talk about data in the big picture. And I wanted to show you guys a data visualization of 4 cities around the world. What you're looking at is visits color categorized by venue category, elapsing over the course of a 24-hour period. And not only does this kind of just look really cool, it's kind of mesmerizing, like a lava lamp, you can just keep watching it. But what it actually, I think, gives a really good sense of is how people are moving through the city, but more importantly, how people are moving through the economy. And if you look at foot traffic through that lens, you can start to make some really interesting extrapolations from a business standpoint. So as people are moving around the world and they have our software installed on their phones, they're passing us location signals constantly. And we use those to build what we call place shapes. And so this is the place shape for the room that we're all in right now. And essentially what you're looking at down on the bottom there is visits elapsing over the course of the week with GPS signal strength color coordinated according to the likelihood that it is associated with this particular place. GPS signal can vary, but over time what we've been able to do is build essentially areas of probability that a particular set of geosignals are associated with this particular venue or any other place in the 105 million places we have in our data set around the world. And this is actually really important because it's what gives us the ability to passively understand with accuracy how people are moving in and out of places, whether they've explicitly told us so or not. And that gets really important when you're trying to make predictions. So last April, we made a prediction that Chipotle would see a 30% same-store sales drop year over year in Q1. They came out 11 days later and said it was actually 29.7%. So that's about a 1% margin of error. A lot of people on Wall Street were like, how did you guys do this? And actually, fun fact, 3 of the 5 biggest hedge funds now license our data to bet one way or another on the stock market. But another funny story about this is we had been trying to get a meeting with Chipotle since I started working at Foursquare like 4.5 years ago, and they would not pick up the phone. Within 1 week of this story, we had a meeting with the CMO. And now they're a huge client of ours because they don't need us to tell them that same-store sales are dropping. They see that in their bottom line. But what we can tell them is which customers they lost. As it turns out, it was their most loyal customer base. The most frequent visitors were the ones who were most impacted by the E. coli scare. More importantly, who's picking up that market share? How do they go out and reactivate against those loyalists? That's what you can do with this kind of data if you look at it at scale and do all the things that we do on the normalization side of things. But location intelligence doesn't just give you a picture of what's happening with an E. coli outbreak. You can actually look at much bigger world events. So this is a picture of the Bosphorus, or it's a map rather, of the Bosphorus in Turkey. And what these red and orange dots represent are the places that we saw the steepest decline in foot traffic the weekend of July 16th, 2016, as compared to the weekend before. July 16th was the weekend of the coup attempt in Istanbul. So if I play this video, you will see the heat represents areas where we're seeing drops in foot traffic over that 72-hour period. And you can see that different parts of the city are impacted as events are unfolding in the streets. But what's really interesting to me is not just looking at a snapshot in time, which is what this represents, and to start to look at it in aggregate. So if you look at the aggregation of that drop in foot traffic, you will see that the areas you would expect to drop the most, bridges, transportation centers, areas along the Bosphorus, et cetera, those are the first things to see a precipitous decline. But over the course of that weekend, there isn't a part of that city that wasn't affected by the events that were transpiring. So location intelligence can give you a super interesting vantage point into the world if applied correctly. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Peter, who's going to talk about how you can apply those same methodologies to business tools.
Good afternoon. I'm going to take you through 3 different enterprise products that we have out in the market today. Swen touched on this earlier with the Chipotle example, but Foursquare Analytics, which launched in Q1 of this year, it's a business intelligence tool that looks at real-time foot traffic to different stores and restaurants. It looks at monthly share of visits, category trends, loyalty, and defection. You can slice this data by age, gender, DMA. It solves an important problem or challenge for businesses. They want to know, is foot traffic to my stores increasing or decreasing? And if it is, where am I getting it from, or where's it going? Is it going to my biggest competitor, or is it going to someone that is more of a mom and pop, or someone that I'm unaware of? Today we have some early partners: TGI Fridays, H&M, Taco Bell, Equinox, and they're getting this in a monthly dashboard. Attribution. So this is our ability to tie a digital ad impression to an offline visit. So you have, a Subway, for example, running with 10 or 12 different vendors, billions of ad impressions. These ad logs will overlap with our first-party panel, which is fully normalized here in the United States. It's representative of the US population by age, gender, and DMA. We then build an exposed and control group using very strict methodology. Our control group, again, is controlled for age, gender, DMA, and past visit history to that restaurant or store. And that's actually an important one, because if you take that out of the equation, you see the lift numbers kind of get pretty big. So you have to control for sort of past visit behaviors if you're going to get an understanding if these vendors are producing visit lift. Not only at a vendor level, but we also report back on a creative level. So if you want to understand if your video or display or rich media is driving more people into my restaurant or store, we can report back on that. And again, both of these products are using only first-party data. We have a persistent view of these people as they walk in and out of stores. And that's important because not only do we know when someone walks into a place, we also know when they are not walking into a place. And having a persistent view without any blind spots is critical for us. And this is Pilgrim Sdk. So this is something that we're very bullish on and very excited about. We've been developing this technology for years. It powers our 2 consumer apps. We've decoupled this SDK over the last year and a half now, and it's been in private beta. We just launched it in Q1 of this year. We have a bunch of large apps like TouchTunes and Capital One that are using this technology. What this essentially does is it allows someone to identify where a person is passively. So as a phone walks in and out of a place, we are tagging those people with visits. And it does so using stop detection. So if a phone is walking by a store and we see sort of low, how do I explain this better? We see a low level of signal data coming from that device. So we see these location trails throughout the day, which you see here on your right. But when we see that phone has stopped for a period of about 3 minutes, our technology sort of wakes up. And it says, ping this device for the GPS, the Wi-Fi coordinates, let's read the beacons in the area, let's read all the signals that we can to identify where that phone is. And all of this technology has been built using machine learning off of a first-party deterministic data set, 12 billion check-ins over 7 years. So it's classic ML. We are looking at a truth set. We're building this technology, and we have a very good ability, or a very high and accurate ability, to identify when that phone walks into a place. And that sort of methodology that I just explained to you takes into account a battery efficiency. If you guys look at your phones and look at the apps that are using the battery on your devices, you'll see some of the more popular social networks. That's because they're pinging your phone for location signals all the time. They want to know where you are, so they can build segments, they can do measurement, they can do lots of things with it. We are only pinging that phone when we see that it has stopped for a period of time. So brands are using this to build segments for targeting. They are using it to push notifications to users based on where they are. Capital One's a good example. If you go to a gas station and Capital Rewards points are 3x that month, they'll ping you with a notification that says use the Capital One card here and get cash back. So there's lots of use cases for this, and we're excited about this technology. So to sum up, you can use this data, location data, to gather intelligence and insights that can dictate what your creative strategy will be, what your audience segmentation or targeting should be, and it really is an innovative tool for consumer applications across the world.
Okay, thanks everyone. So. To start with, I think we'll have just a couple questions to the panel in general and then maybe open up to the floor. So one of the areas that kind of ties all of these together is that there is a progression of understanding who it is that you're targeting. If you look at the people who lack financial identity, you look at the ability to actually go after and kind of come up with a specific audience to address, whether it's through location-based services or on a strategic level from a marketing level. I'd be interested in getting some input in terms of where do you see the next step of technology taking us to bring these things at scale? Because there's a lot of stickiness in kind of the current approaches, and there is an opportunity to open this up to things you discussed, blockchain, applying intelligence, and applying the location-based services where identity is synthesized by what you are, and in essence, it's the data's telling you what's happening rather than trying to take data and then mash it on to the rest of the world as a contrast. So,
do you want me to start? Okay. So hi, I can start, and I will say that my belief from an intelligence perspective is that a lot of us have been using the word artificial intelligence, machine learning, in a lot of very kind of large ways. The true nature of what I believe is the future is all of the connections through SDKs, through APIs, and bringing that data back to bear. And the true intelligence behind that is being able to use all those data live and with real learning investigations on top of them. And so we, with Datorama, have been working on developing some capabilities. One is our CBO, our cognitive bid optimization model. We're also working on cognitive audience from our standpoint in our own internal data, which we're now looking at seeing how that can be more advanced. With blockchain, on the other hand, when you're talking about personalization and data being taken wherever you want it, in the financial market, it's been used quite significantly for transactional-based purchases. Now we're looking at it relative to advertising, and we can talk about that more in the future. But I think that those are the two places where identity matching across a network is actually going to be the future of tomorrow.
Okay.
I agree definitely on the financial identity, being able to take advantage of the blockchain technology. We're nowhere near that. We're still trying to figure out how to access data. If you remember, emerging countries has very little. I'm creating my own proprietary data through the APK, and I've actually been in the data business for 30 years. I've talked to my friends and families and colleagues, and they don't have data for me in Kenya, Philippines, and Tanzania. If you do, and I haven't talked to you, please come to me, because I want to use it. I'm on the other side, and it's wonderful. No, but seriously, in terms of the technology, I think that we have a lot of foundation to do before we can start using some of the more advanced techniques.
Okay. So maybe just to continue on the some context for the blockchain. One of the things that is certainly being touted, I don't know how many people know what it is, but basically it's a distributed database that you can put rules around and have privacy and identity controls around. That creates an opportunity for, particularly in Europe and places where you have privacy regulations, to actually get down there and understand what the opportunity is, how is your data being used, creates the opportunity for new models where you may actually be compensated for the use of your data as an individual or as an entity that's represented on the blockchain. Do you guys have any comment on how that might impact current uses of data and having it be more participatory, because I think that the pushback on ad blockers and feeling tracked and things like that, certainly it's a historic balance that can easily swing one way or the other.
So I think from the personalization side, or at least the personal identity side, what you just said is actually where the technology needs to go, and that's where if you have a distributed network and the blockchain is actually providing the identity across all different types of nodes, and you can't actually ever identify that node unless you have all connections to that node replaced. Therefore, your personal information is now infallible and protected, because it can't be actually distributed out unless you have the network in the market. So that means that advertising at any given time acts as an activation with blockchain, but then the data coming back to it would have to be on the data side, where the DSPs or the ad servers would then have to then read that data back into your systems. So the connection is always internal instead of external, being out there on the web.
Okay.
In terms of the providing financial identity, it's already being used by some social nonprofit and GMO, and thinking about how do we give access to people on a broad scale to the economy. And that is for people who don't have identification in anything. They don't even have, an ID at all. So let alone a credit history. So that's started. If in parallel we can use that information and technology, start giving people identity and ownership, then it allows them to partake in our commerce.
Okay, so we have time for maybe one question. Oh, sorry.
Yes, I think one of the thing that I think is interesting to add to the technology conversation about this is having the privacy equation of kind of that paradigm, if not solved, secured by some technology, will hopefully make room for the contract between the marketer and the consumer about the value to the consumer of the authorization to utilize their data to be somewhat more explicit and more accepted, as obviously we evolve towards marketing technologies that allow us more and more targeting to consumers.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Time's up.